The Paracave Podcast, proudly brought to you by major sponsor Jack's Pale Ale, exclusively available at Parramatta Leagues Club, Shannon Cooney from Glenmore Park Realty, BTZD Clothing, and the official media partner of the Paracave Podcast, the Parramatta Times.
Welcome to another episode of the Paracave Podcast. And now over to your host, Troy Warner, broadcasting live from the world-famous Paracave.
And yes, hello and welcome back to the Paracave Podcast. Troy Warner here, and it is a game day preview podcast, and it is the Eels taking on the Bulldogs at Accor Stadium in round number 14 of the NRL. The King's birthday on Monday, June the 10th, and look, it's the King's 200th game as well. Clint Gutherson for Parramatta, 200 games, so congratulations to him. But look, this is going to be a big game. There's going to be a big crowd there at this game at Accor Stadium. I can sense that there may even be about 40,000 there. I'm going to go for an estimate of about 40,000 there. This game last year attracted about 34,000 in the crowd, I think it was, which was won by Parramatta 34 points to 12. But this is 2024, and look, completely different sides playing in this game. Now, look, if we look at a few stats here before we kick off with this year's game, if you have a look overall, 166 matches played between these two clubs, the Bulldogs starting in 1935 and the Parramatta Eels starting the competition in 1947, and it is a lead to the Bulldogs, 85 wins to the Parramatta Eels 76. Played at this venue of Accor Stadium, there has been 35 matches played between the two clubs, and it is pretty even, with the Eels holding a one-game win advantage over the Bulldogs, who have 17 wins, the Eels 18. Now, it's very interesting, the last 10 games, which goes back to 2020, Parramatta hold a pretty great advantage there, a big advantage. So you could almost say that Parramatta are one of the bogey teams for the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs at the moment, especially after their last 10 games, with Parramatta winning 8 and the Bulldogs winning 2. The last time they met was round 1 this year at CommBank Stadium. It was the last game of the round, I believe, or the second last game of the round 1, with Parramatta winning 26 points to 8. Look, there's been some massive favourite games and familiar games, famous games between these two clubs. And look, this is not going to be all biased towards Parramatta wins. There are some wins in these games from the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs. And look, some of the games that they have won are not my favourite games, and for Parramatta fans they won't be either, but they deserve to be mentioned because they are pretty famous games indeed. Look, going back to 1983, the major semi, Eric Grothe Sr. scores that try at the SCG with Ray Warren commentating. If you have not seen it, YouTube it, search Eric Grothe Sr. try SCG versus Bulldogs. He beat about 5 or 6 players, started on one side of the field, ended up on the other side of the field and scored the try. It was probably one of the best tries that you will ever see in rugby league by a winger. Funnily enough, it's probably not Eric's favourite try. I think in the podcast chat I had with him a few years ago now, his favourite try that he scored was against St George in a finals game, which actually won them the game. But for many Eels fans, that try really stands out as their favourite. 1984, Canterbury beat Parramatta 6-4 in a low-scoring grand final, and the grand final was won through a Mark Bugden try. Now, I've had Mark on the podcast just recently, a while back, and just recently, I should say, and he explains about that try that he scored at the SCG that day. Beat a few defenders and got across the line and gave Canterbury the win. That is probably the try and game that he is most famous for, I would think. And that was in a premiership winning side. Round 10, 1986. Now, Canterbury become the first team to beat Parramatta at the new Parramatta Stadium. So, Parramatta lost that day to Canterbury, and it's also famous as well. Former guest on the podcast, David Gillespie, was sin binned. I think he was fighting with, albeit Peter Sterling that day. I couldn't imagine Peter Sterling fighting on with Cement Gillespie, but anyway. That happened. I think Sterlo also had a fight in 1986 with Les Davidson as well at Parramatta Stadium as well. So, very brave man indeed, P. Sterling. Also, if you would have seen the reel that I put out just a couple of days ago, future guest Graham Atkins, he scored a try in that game and kicked 2 goals as well. And then we roll on to the 1986 grand final, which obviously the Parramatta Eels won 4-2, the only tryless grand final in rugby league history. And look, it was a very, I guess you could say, defensive game, that one. Brett Kenny had 2 tries disallowed. It'd be interesting to see what the bunker would say these days about those tries. But 2 tries disallowed, which would have given him 2 tries in every grand final that he played. That Parramatta would have won. Obviously scoring 2 tries in 81, 2 and 3. If he got 2 tries in 86, that would have been 2 tries in every grand final that Parramatta had won. So that would have been a magnificent feat, that one. Mick Delroy getting taken out by Andrew Farrar on the wing, heavily concussed. What else was there? Paul Dunn, former guest on the podcast, played for both clubs. He mentioned that if he got the ball from dummy half, I think that was Mark Bugden as well at the time, that to the left-hand side, he believes that Canterbury would have won that game. But Mark went down the right-hand side and was tackled by about 6 or 7 Parramatta players as it was. I think Ray Price was involved in that last ever tackle in that game. 1993, round 5, the Bulldogs beat Parramatta 42-6. Now, if I can remember correctly, that was multicultural round in the day in the 90s, and I think it was on a Easter Monday at the time. I remember that game because I was on a family day out. I was only a young tacker then, and on a family day out at Genolan Caves, I believe it was. So, with the game not live on TV, I was relying on the ever-present, I think it might have been 2UE at the time, the continuous call team. I think they were on 2UE 954 back in 1993. I'm not too sure when they switched over to GB. But I just remember them doing I think it was the call of the game. So every now and again, somehow I would get a score update. I might have even taken like a handheld radio with me or something like that, just so I could get some reception and some score updates. But I'm probably wishing now that I didn't get those score updates, because it was won by the Bulldogs 42-6. Look, obviously the transfer of the full 4 Bulldogs players to the Eels in 1996 during that Super League war is pretty familiar with both these teams, and just adds a little bit more flavour to each and every game that has been played. Jared McCracken, Jim Dimmick, Jason Smith and Dean Pay. So that's always interesting from those mid-90s to the early 2000s, or mid-90s to late 90s when these two clubs played. It was always a point that was brought up. Look, the game that I'm talking about that Eels fans won't like, and it's my least favourite Parramatta Eels game ever, is the 1998 preliminary final against the Bulldogs, Eels and Bulldogs, at the Sydney Football Stadium. 18-2, Parramatta were leading with 11 minutes to go. The game went into extra time and Canterbury ended up winning 32 points to 20 now. Yeah, that game is very hard to talk about with former guests, both Parramatta players and Canterbury players. The Canterbury players, they don't mind talking about it. Jason Hetherington just recently loved talking about it. He was actually hoping that the field goal from Craig Polamaunta right on full time went over because he was buggered in that game. He was so tired. He was wishing that field goal went over, but it didn't. And look, that is a game that is probably most memorable or forgettable for Paul Carriage as well. It was his last ever game in the NRL, and unfortunately a lot of fans do like to blame him for that loss, which is unfair because it is a team sport. Yes, he did have some moments there where he regrets and wished that he didn't do and didn't happen, but you just can't blame it all on one player. 2001 round 23, we saw a wide running back rower with a ton of pace score a try at the showground, and of course I'm talking about Nathan Highmarsh. Scored a great try that night. As I said, wide running. He had a lot of pace back in the day early on in his career. He probably won't mind me saying this, but not so much in the later end of his career, but definitely early on. Wide running, scored a great try that night. The 2009 prelim final. So Parramatta get their revenge from 1998 in front of 74,500 fans at Accor Stadium. They win 22 points to 12. Now, I think it was ANZ Stadium back then. 22-12 win for the Eels, which propelled them into the grand final against the Melbourne Storm, which they went down. Hence, we know what happened after that in 2010. But this game here, that was a massive game. They actually split the crowd in the stadium to half blue and white and half blue and gold, so it looked really good on TV. I didn't actually go to this game. I don't know what the reason was back in the day, but I did not go to this game. I did watch it on TV, and it looked spectacular. And if you listen to the podcast with players who played in that game, Ben Smith, Tim Manor, Nathan Highmarsh, Nathan Kalis, they all tell me that is one of their favourite games that they've played in, just for that sheer fact that the crowds were split in half. And if you looked left, I can't remember which side both sets of fans are sitting on, but if you look left, for example, you'd see blue and gold. If you look right, you'd see blue and white. So it looked amazing there, and it was an amazing game as well. Tim Manor scored a great try there. I think Daniel Mortimer scored a try there as well in that game. And yeah, certainly an exciting time for Eels fans. 2020 was round one of the NRL season that day, and it was a low-scoring affair, 8 points to 2. And Reid Marnie, who now plays for the Bulldogs, scored the season opening try that night, and practically sealed the game for Parramatta. So it was 8-2 in that one. And of course, as I just mentioned before, the last time before round one this year, they met at Accor Stadium. It was 34 points to 12, and Clint Gutherson scored 3 tries on that day. I think there was a couple of try assists from Mitchell Moses on that day, but 3 tries to the King on that day. So, looking forward to this game. And as I mentioned, it is 4 o'clock on June the 10th. the King's birthday Monday public holiday in New South Wales. And going into this game, the Bulldogs are placed in 9th, the Eels are in 15th. The Bulldogs having 2 more wins than the Eels. The Bulldogs, they come off a great win against Newcastle, up in Newcastle, 32 points to 2 last week. The Eels, they got back to form, having a win against the Cronulla Sharks, 34 points to 22, which was the return game for Mitchell Moses and Clint Gutherson after coming back from injury. Now, that means that the Bulldogs have won their last 3 out of their last 5. The Eels, they needed that win against the Bulldogs. Against the Sharks. That was only their first win in 5 attempts. So they needed that win to get back into the scheme of things. So they'll be looking to go back-to-back wins. In terms of points scored this season, the Bulldogs have had some pretty big wins against the Dragons and against the Newcastle Knights, as just mentioned. So they've scored 270 points. The Eels have scored 247. Defence is where the difference is at the moment. The Eels have had 3 times, I think it is, where they've had 40 points or more scored against them, and their defence sits at 354 points let in, and the Bulldogs 193. So they've tightened up their defence a lot this season, and completion rates pretty even. Bulldogs 78%, Eels 76%. Now, the interesting, if you go to the team lineups for this week, there is a few ins, a few outs. Bailey Simonson, who has succumbed to an ACL injury, he is out for the season. So Sean Russell comes onto his wing, and Blaze Talangi comes into the starting centre position. He was on the bench last week against the Sharks and unfortunately didn't get any game time at all. So it's great to have Blaze back into the team. Mitchell Moses and Clint Gutherson are playing their second game back from injury, so they'll be all better for their run last Thursday. A long time between games for the Eels, 10 days. They played on a Thursday against the Sharks, and then they're playing on a Monday, so hopefully a good preparation with that time that they've had off in between games. Jermaine Hopgood is back into the lock position from Origin duties. So Joe Offahengawi goes to the bench. Now, look, it'll be interesting to see what happens if there is any game day changes. Junior Paulo has been going back to the bench and Joe has been starting. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens there. Sean Lane on the bench with Makatoa and Wiramu Greg as well. Now, there are thoughts that maybe Dijon Arcee may make his way into the side somehow. He didn't play in New South Wales Cup, so there may be some room for him to go into this side somehow. So be interesting to see what happens there. But so pretty much the same side as last week. Obviously, only the big change there is Bailey Simonson due to injury, and Jermaine Hopgood coming back into the side. For the Bulldogs, Stephen Crichton, who played Origin for New South Wales, he comes back. Now, that's a big back for them. And look, unfortunately, Josh Addo-Carr, who has a pretty good record playing against Parramatta, scoring some tries, especially at Accor Stadium, he is out as well for an extended period. I think it's about 8 weeks or so, with a hamstring injury. So Matt Burton also comes back into the 5'8" spot for the Bulldogs. He was left out of the win against Newcastle as he was 18th man for New South Wales, and the way that the rules are, 18th men can't play for their clubs, which the Bulldogs were upset about, but rules are rules. He didn't play, so he'll be itching to get into playing this weekend after having 2 weeks off from playing. Obviously not playing against the Newcastle Knights and not playing in Origin as well. He wasn't required there. So he'll be itching to get back on that field, as all footy players do. But so some big ins for the Bulldogs there. One player who I think Parramatta may have to keep an eye on is Connor Tracy. He has been playing some good footy at fullback there. And look, he is a fast man. He can score tries. He can get him into a position to score tries. He does have an error in him or two, but he still retains his spot in the team. But look, what fullback doesn't have an error or two in them from these times? Also the big one is Reid Marnie. Now, Reid obviously re-signed with the Bulldogs from Parramatta last season. This is his second year back at the Bulldogs. He came from the Bulldogs to the Eels. Now he's gone back to the Dogs. And look, he has been in the headlines over the last couple of weeks for, I guess you could say, for some of his tactics that he has. Maybe it's the niggle tactics. Look, the Bulldogs have had some good nigglers on the field over the last 10 years or so. Josh Reynolds comes to mind, Michael Ennis comes to mind, and now they've passed the baton on to Reid Marnie. Now, the last two times they've played at Combank Stadium, certainly, I guess maybe he has tried those tactics, but someone like Regan Campbell-Gillard isn't falling for those tactics, and Reid hasn't had the best of games against Parramatta, so it'll be interesting to see how he goes this Monday against Parramatta at his home ground. But certainly at Parramatta, he hasn't had the best of, homecomings, I guess you could say, but we'll just have to wait and see what happens there. But I'm sure he'll probably try and turn it on in terms of nagging again. But I think the Parramatta forwards, they won't be baited. I don't think you'll see anybody get upset and try and take him on in a fight or whatever. But he will try, but it won't work with Parramatta. They know what he's like. They've played with him and now against him, so they will not fall for that one. So I must say, though, that the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs, I've been saying it, if you've been listening to the podcast for a while now, I have been saying it, that they are the most, I guess you could say, improved team in 2024. They've had some good wins this season. They sit in 11th spot on the ladder. Now, they would like to be higher, obviously in the top 8, but they have had 6 wins now. I'm not too sure how many they had last year, but this season for sure they are sitting up there in 11th. So they could force themselves up into the top 8 if they get the win and Manly lose whilst I'm recording this podcast. Their game against the Panthers coming a little bit later this afternoon. So if the Sea Eagles lose and the Bulldogs win, they could jump back into 8th spot. So something that, actually they'll go up to 7th spot because the Broncos lost against the Sharks and the Bulldogs have a better for and against at the moment. So they'll jump up to the 7th spot. Now that's a massive achievement so far for the Bulldogs, and it just shows you the sort of players that are doing this. They had a lot of criticism at the start of the year by buying a lot of utility players, but I think they've sort of they've gelled well together, and I think by round 14 they're slowly gelling together. They're getting used to each other. They're finding their positions, and someone like Stephen Crichton is leading from the front. Matt Burton is getting that more experience as well. One player who has come on leaps and bounds this season, I think, is Jacob Kiraz. Now, he takes the hard yards out of the Dogs' ends on kick returns. He has been playing a little bit of centre as well, but mostly on the wing with Bronson Sherry and Stephen Crichton there. But wing is probably, he can take a high ball, he can score tries, but he does take those big runs out of his own half for the Bulldogs on kick returns. So he is one player that has certainly come on leaps and bounds this season, and he's probably having one of his best seasons as well. Mike Acevo has scored 44 tries in his last 44 games, so potentially expect him to score a try this game. Look, Mike Acevo, he's been coming under a lot of pressure from fans, especially this year, about his performances. I guess ever since the trial game way back in late February, where he was suspended, and then also against them in the Manly game where he got 10 minutes in the sin bin. So he's been coming under a lot of pressure from fans, that is for sure. So he'll be up for a big performance. And look, he as I said, he can score a try in this game. In this game last year at Accor Stadium, I'm just checking here, last season he got a try at this venue in this game, so potentially he may get another one and just increase that try scoring record. I'm thinking that Clint Gutherson will be a anytime try scoring special, hence his nickname King, and being the King's birthday. That's all I'm going off. Also the fact that he scored 3 tries last year in this game, but I think he's a special. Now this game is also a very special game for the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs and also the Parramatta Eels to an extent as well, as they are playing for the I Forgive Cup. Now, this came about a couple of years ago now. It's a joint initiative between the Bulldogs and Parramatta, as well as a way of supporting Danny Abdallah and his family, because there was a tragic car accident in Oatlands a few years ago, and they lost some of their children and niece as well. Unfortunately, tragically, they were killed in that accident. So this is a way of, I guess you could say, remembering them, and it's also their decision to adopt forgiveness as the response to the memory of their children and niece who were killed in this accident. So the I Forgive Cup, which will be presented to the winning captain after the game, with both teams in attendance as well. So that's a nice little touch there. As to who wins the game, look, I have tipped the Parramatta Eels. Call me a bit biased, but I just think with Nicho Hynes, in my opinion, and a few others' opinion, not having the best of games in State of Origin, I think Mitchell Moses will have a big game with State of Origin selection around the corner. In my opinion, all I think he needs to do is have a good couple of games from now until selections, and the New South Wales number 7 spot will be his. He would have had the number 7 spot for New South Wales in game 1. However, he suffered that fractured foot against Manly, so and he was out for 10 weeks. So he would have had that spot, but now it is his to lose, I think. All he has to do is have a great couple of games like he did against the Sharks last week, and the number 7 jersey will be his for New South Wales. And I think with the return of Clint Gutherson as well at fullback for the Eels, It just gives them a little bit more leadership on the field as well, a little bit more direction as well, and I think Parramatta will win this game. I think they will. I think it will be a high-scoring game. The weather for the game is going to be fine, and as I said, I think it's going to be fine. And by the time this game kicks off, look, it's not going to be the hottest of temperatures. It's not going to be the coldest of temperatures, but at least it's going to be fine weather. So I expect a big crowd out there. As I said, I think potentially there could be 40,000 there for a club game, and that is unbelievable. And I think that's probably because of the way that the Bulldogs are going this season. They get the support, and look, it's two traditional rivals, Parramatta up against Canterbury. Two traditional rivals. Some would say the biggest rival of Parramatta is the Bulldogs, and some would say that the biggest rival of the Bulldogs is Parramatta, just because of that probably 80s period where both clubs won 4 grand finals. So they've had many a great tussle since then. So I expect it to be a 40,000 plus crowd, I reckon, in this game. I have heard on the grapevine that 34,000 tickets, I think, have been sold. So I think it may get up to that very high 30s, but potentially crack that 40,000 barrier. So it's a public holiday in New South Wales, so people have the day off. If you're looking for something to do, then get to Accor Stadium and watch a great game of rugby league between two rivals. Okay, prediction time. Look, I can't remember what I said on the Talking Para podcast, so if you're a Parramatta Eels fan and you like Parramatta Eels chat, then follow the Talking Para podcast on Instagram and Facebook as well. I'm involved in that one with 5 other crazy mad Parramatta Eels fan, and each week we talk about the games before and after the round. So we preview the game coming up and also review the game that was just played, and we also talk about any Parramatta news that is around during the week as well, and we take questions from viewers as well, so get involved there. 8:15 on a Tuesday night on Facebook is the podcast, so get involved there. It's also on YouTube as well. So I can't remember what I said on Tuesday night, what the score would be, but I think I'm going to go for a 38 to 24 scoreline. I think there's going to be a lot of points scored in this one. I just have a feeling. I think Mitchell Moses' kicking game is going to be outstanding, both long and short. Mike Acevo is going to get a try. I think Clint Gutherson is going to get a try, but I think I will go for Will Penasini as first try scorer in this game. The ball might look like it's going out to Micah, but actually will score a try. I don't know how he'll score the try, whether it's another one of those barnstorming runs from about 10, 15 metres out where he just bowls over defenders and reaches out and scores like he has done in the past against the Dolphins, and just recently this year, I think it was against the Cowboys, by memory, but I think he'll get the first try scorer, and Parramatta will win 38 points to 24. What's your thoughts on the game? What are your predictions on the game? Who do you think will win? What do you think the score will be? Who do you think your first try scorer will be? Let me know. I'll do a post on this one, so let me know in the comments on the post on Instagram. So tell all your family and friends to follow the podcast on Instagram as well. Thank you very much for listening to this preview versus the Bulldogs versus the Eels. I hope you really enjoyed it. I hope you really enjoy the content that is coming your way on the Paracave podcast, and I thank you for your support for both listening and getting involved in the podcast. Thank you very much. And look, if you're a Bulldog supporter listening to this podcast, I don't mind. I'm not discriminating. Good luck. May your team play the best football they can and challenge Parramatta. But I am going to say go Para. I hope Parramatta get the win and go Para.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Paracave Podcast. See you next time.